It's a large number, but you see we have 87 million that are classed as extremely poor. We have overtaken India, which is 7 times our population, in becoming the world capital of poverty. And what we have seen by looking at countries like, say, China, is that if you actually assembled the right kind of thought,
minds,
the right kind of thought, what is the thought that is produced in government? It matters. So they produce the kind of thought that enabled them understand the powers of having a market-oriented philosophy that could solve a number of problems at the same time, while the government focused on basic services delivery to citizens. And, that essentially is a very, academic way of saying health, education, everything that's got to do with human development. Government had to push in that direction and then have the right kind of economic philosophy, economic management philosophy, the right kinds of policies that provided an attraction to private capital, whether they were domestic investment or foreign investment. Once those two were going together, China actually began to grow in leaps and bounds, double-digit growth over more than 2.5 decades, right? And guess what that growth did for them? They went from less than $1 trillion GDP as early as, or is it late as the 90s. Today, China's GDP is $14 trillion. Our own GDP is about maybe $98 billion. In growing, and that's what I need people to understand, economic growth is the pathway to taking people out of poverty. If you're not growing, you will not. What you will do is those who are in poverty will remain and you will add more. So your absolute number will just keep growing. China, on the other hand, by doing those right things, lifted more than 700 million people out of poverty since it started its economic reform.
Is it by giving to them handouts to them? Is it by handouts? No. What did China do that we can borrow from to move? You talked about education, health, and everything that has to do with human capital development. In what aspect? Let's take education, for instance. What aspects in particular, and how would that work?
So basically, the kind of education that countries like China or Singapore or Malaysia, what they focused on is education that unleashes the talent of the people to solve problems. And so the curriculum, this is part of the kind of reform that we were doing. Remember that I interacted with you guys when we were doing education reforms in this country. So education that that unleashes the talent, the capacity, the skills, the adaptive capabilities to be able to solve problems. So technical innovation kind of education. And what that did for them was that they provided a massive scale of, massive stock of skills that when private sector decided there is opportunity in China, look at the population. If we enter this market where the policies are friendly now, saying I can invest in this economy, my profit would be guaranteed me. Nobody's going to bring some policy that destroys my initial. So when the private capital then responds to that role of government in providing and enabling, what do you think happens? They create opportunities for jobs. The fastest way that you take people out of poverty is to give them jobs because that's how they earn income. And my proposal in my manifesto, which, by the way, you can find by visiting the internet, obi2019.com, obi2019.com. You see our really well thought through manifesto. What we're saying there is that we want to be the government that is so pro-business. Pro-business. Private sector is your sustainable package. Private sector is the engine of growth, and then contradicting what we're saying by the way that we're looking at the economy. That whole contradiction is what stagnates a society economically. So we're going to do our economic policy, philosophy will be very clear, the direction will be clear to everybody, and then the focus on ensuring that the aspects of policy, institutions building, and everything that's got to do with priority choice of investment in critical infrastructure. There are just some kind of infrastructure that the government has to be the massive risk taker. And when it puts itself forward to take the risk, it can, reduce that risk by finding some interesting ways of it, bringing in private capital to solve some of the problems. And then, look at the energy sector. We already have the roadmap for the energy sector to work. But a lot of the political hubris stands in the way of it working. We are going to be the kind of government that will take every risk necessary in order for us to achieve development. We don't have 4 months, not to talk of having 4 years. That's why I say to Nigerians that the idea you want to experiment between what they call the lesser of two evils. How can you even have lesser of two evils? The common denominator of evil is evil. So just perish that idea that there is any new momentum that will come from there. You need, for you to solve a problem, I think it was Einstein that said that you cannot solve a problem with the momentum that created it. So to think that the momentum that created all of these would suddenly solve it, that's like, wishful thinking. So we do know that in terms of economic growth and development, it's not rocket science. It's really that we have a problem. We haven't fixed our politics. That's the only reason I entered this race, because I finally came to the conclusion that if we kept joking with our political class, my goodness, my great-grandchildren would come and meet a worse Nigeria. We need to fix our politics. That is the point that Lee Kuan Yew made in his own kind of leadership.
But you also know that Lee Kuan Yew shut out the rest of the world and worked from within. Sort of, so to speak. Would you be looking at working from within the country? Do you think what is needed to set Nigeria right is within?
Not so with Lee Kuan Yew, really, because what you could say for him was that he was a person given to economic pragmatism. So he knew when, those kinds of nationalist, idea was what he needed. He knew when to play that card. But he knew that the basis of economic expansion is for you to find solutions that come from all over the world. That's why, the country that most attracted a lot of the tech companies was Singapore. So in those early days, so the microchip and the Intel and all of them, as they began to move, Singapore is a city-state. The only thing it has going for it is really that it has run effective government. And on the basis of that, it attracted the private sector.
You, 87 million below the poverty line, and you intend to lift 80 million out of it immediately.
No, don't say immediately, because you can't achieve that immediately.
Okay.
Basically,
well, that's the long-term plan. Is it time for us to begin to look at our population growth?
You raise a very important point. So there are many ways to look at that thing. And what research shows us...
You only have 1 minute to respond to that.
Do you know what, Alero, what research shows to us?
Yeah.
Give the girls education. The more the girl child is educated, she can make decisions concerning what number of children she wants to have. So that's what we found has worked the most. Even in societies where, if you started a conversation about birth control, people immediately shut down, right? For religious beliefs and all of that. Yeah. But when you give the girl child education, she delays marriage. When she gets married, she makes decisions about what number of children because she has a voice, so she can have that conversation. That's what we must do.
Obi Ezekwesili of the Allied Congress Party of Nigeria,
ACPN.
the presidential candidate of the Allied Congress Party of Nigeria. Thank you very much
Thank you,
for coming
Alera.
to spend this time with us this morning.
Thank you.
At least now we have a better idea of what you're offering Nigerians.
Yeah,
and Nigerians will be happy for this chance
I know.
to listen
I
to you.
am the credible candidate. I'm the one who is running for the Nigerian people. I am the candidate of the Nigerian people. Others are, you know, these dominant parties are running for the political class, not them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. Sunrise will be right back to continue the conversations. Thank you very much for staying with us.